Have you ever had a leg cramp that was so intense, you couldn't move for what felt like hours? The kind that wakes you up in the middle of the night, twisting and seizing your calf with an unforgiving grip. Imagine this, you're standing in front of a huge crowd, speaking about an important topic, when suddenly, you feel the unmistakable sharp pull in your leg. Your body freezes, and for a second, you wonder if you can keep going. Your mind races through 1,000 thoughts. How do I stop this? How long will it last? And worst of all, how embarrassing is this going to be? This is exactly what happened to Jack Owens, a health researcher known for his work on body performance and wellness. But this wasn't just a random day. Jack had a big presentation coming up, one that could catapult his career to the next level. He stood before an audience of executives, investors, and even influencers in the world of technology. The room was filled with high-profile individuals, all eagerly waiting to hear his pitch. Jack had been preparing for months. But at that very moment, the unexpected struck. A sharp pain shot through his left leg, right in the middle of his speech. He felt the muscles in his calf clenching, the painful tightness creeping up his leg like a vice. He tried to keep his composure, continuing to talk as if nothing had happened, but deep down, he knew he was fighting a losing battle. His leg was seizing up, and all he wanted was to sit down and rub it out. But that was impossible, he couldn't afford to look unprepared, unprofessional. Just breathe, Jack. Just keep talking, he thought, trying to block out the discomfort. But the cramp wouldn't let go. It twisted and pulled, making him wince in pain. For a split second, he debated whether he should just stop and say he needed a break. But what would they think? Would they question his ability to handle stress? The more Jack thought about it, the worse it got. Maybe I should just push through, Jack murmured, focusing on his words. But it was no use. He could feel his speech faltering as his body responded to the painful jolt. He had been here before, facing these cramps during late-night workouts, long flights, and sometimes, even after a long day of sitting in front of his computer screen. But nothing compared to the intensity of this one. His mind flashed to a conversation he had with an old friend, the kind of conversation that changes your life in an unexpected way. A conversation with none other than Elon Musk. Yes, the same Elon Musk who had built some of the most innovative companies in the world, from Tesla to SpaceX. It had been months since their last chat, but the memory stuck with him. Elon had always been known for his discipline, his ability to push the limits of what was possible. But this time, it wasn't about rockets or electric cars. It was about something much more personal, leg cramps. "What's your secret, Elon?" Jack had asked him during a late-night call. Jack had been struggling with leg cramps for years, and the constant interruptions were starting to take a toll on his work and his health. The cramps had become more frequent, often appearing during moments when he needed to be at his best. To Jack's surprise, Elon didn't hesitate. 3 foods, Elon had said matter-of-factly. "They're simple, but they work every time. I've been using them for years, and they're a game changer." "A game changer?" Jack repeated, half skeptical, half curious. "You wouldn't believe me if I told you," Elon continued. "But trust me, it's all about the right combination of nutrients. These foods keep me going through the late nights and intense work weeks." "What are they?" Jack had asked eagerly. Elon paused for a moment, as though choosing his words carefully. "Bananas, almonds, and spinach," he finally said. "Those 3, in that order. I eat them regularly, keeps the cramps away." Jack chuckled, thinking it was some sort of prank, but Elon's tone was dead serious. "It's all about potassium, magnesium, and iron. These 3 nutrients work together to prevent muscle cramps. Your body needs a balance of them, and if you don't have it, your muscles are more likely to seize up. I'm telling you, these foods have made all the difference." Jack didn't know whether to laugh or thank Elon for his help. But as the weeks went by, and the cramps continued to plague him, he started to wonder, could Elon be onto something? Now, Standing in front of the audience, Jack couldn't shake the thought from his mind. Was it really that simple? Could the secret to ending his leg cramps really be found in just 3 foods? As he fought through the pain and wrapped up his presentation, Jack couldn't wait to get back to his hotel room and try what Elon had suggested. Maybe, just maybe, this is the answer, he thought as he ended the presentation with a shaky smile. The audience applauded, but Jack could barely focus on the claps. All he could think about was the relief he hoped to find from those 3 foods. It wasn't until later that night, when Jack finally had some time to himself, that he made his way to the hotel's small grocery section. He bought the bananas, the almonds, and the spinach, hoping that this might finally be the key to ending the crippling leg cramps that had taken over his life. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. Ever had a leg cramp so bad you couldn't move? This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? Jack Owens wasn't always the person you'd expect to be struggling with something as trivial as leg cramps. He was the kind of guy who pushed through challenges, always looking for ways to improve himself. A renowned researcher in the health and wellness space, Jack had spent years studying the human body, experimenting with nutrition, and testing performance strategies that could enhance people's physical and mental capabilities. Yet, despite all his knowledge, there was one thing that kept him from achieving his full potential: the dreaded leg cramps. It seemed ironic, really. Jack had dedicated his career to understanding the intricate details of muscle function and body mechanics. He had written books on nutrition, giving advice on how to optimize everything from energy levels to muscle recovery. He was the go-to expert for anyone seeking to improve their physical performance. But no matter how much research he did, no matter how many hours he spent in the gym perfecting his routines, he still couldn't escape the crippling discomfort of leg cramps. It was a problem that plagued him for years. The cramps had first appeared when Jack was in college, just after an intense soccer practice. He hadn't paid much attention to it then, just a minor annoyance that went away after a few minutes. But as the years went on, the cramps became more frequent, more intense, and much harder to ignore. Sometimes they struck in the middle of the night, yanking him awake from a deep sleep. Other times, they hit while he was presenting at conferences, in the middle of an important conversation, or, as was the case today, during a high-stakes presentation in front of a room full of investors. Jack had seen doctors, tried every over-the-counter remedy, and even dabbled in some home remedies, but nothing worked. The cramps didn't seem to follow any particular pattern. They could strike after sitting for too long, or sometimes even after a long run. The unpredictability made them even more frustrating. He spent countless nights researching the causes of leg cramps, diving into journals and speaking with colleagues who specialized in muscle physiology. Despite his expertise, Jack found himself at a loss. It was humbling, even embarrassing, to admit that his own body was betraying him. But there was one person Jack could always turn to when he needed advice: Elon Musk. Their friendship had started years ago at Stanford University. Both of them were young, ambitious, and determined to make a mark on the world. Elon was already building his empire in the tech world, while Jack was working toward a PhD in human biology. Despite their different fields, the two had bonded over their shared drive to make an impact, often staying up late into the night discussing their latest ideas and projects. It was during those late-night talks that Jack first learned about Elon's passion for optimal health. Elon had always been known for his relentless work ethic and his ability to push through exhaustion. But Jack had never realized how much care Elon put into his own health and well-being. He had learned from his friend that even someone as busy and successful as Elon understood the importance of maintaining physical and mental balance. A few years later, when Jack had his first breakthrough in muscle physiology, Elon was one of the first people he called to share the news. The two had stayed in touch, even though their paths had diverged. Jack's research was focused on fitness and human performance, while Elon was busy with SpaceX, Tesla, and other groundbreaking projects. But their friendship remained strong. It was on one of those late-night calls, as Jack confided in Elon about his ongoing struggle with leg cramps, that the conversation took a surprising turn. "Jack," Elon had said, his voice steady and calm. "I've been there. You know how much I push myself. But there's a simple solution to this problem that I've found, and it's something most people overlook." Jack had listened intently as Elon explained his method for preventing leg cramps, 3 foods that had become a staple in Elon's daily routine. At first, Jack had laughed it off. After all, this was Elon Musk, the man who built rockets and changed the world, not someone who would be handing out dietary advice. But the more Jack thought about it, the more he realized that Elon wasn't the type to offer advice unless it was truly valuable. "Bananas, almonds, and spinach," Elon had said. "That's it. Trust me, it works." It wasn't the kind of solution Jack expected. After all, he had spent years studying complex muscle functions and nutrition regimens. The idea that something as simple as bananas could solve his long-standing issue with leg cramps seemed almost too good to be true. But Elon's voice carried a weight of confidence, and Jack knew his friend wouldn't recommend something unless he truly believed it worked. Still, Jack was skeptical. Could something as simple as food really hold the key to ending his leg cramps? He had tried so many solutions already, from electrolyte supplements to stretching routines, all to no avail. But Elon had insisted, urging him to give it a shot. And so, Jack found himself back in the hotel grocery store that evening, grabbing a bunch of bananas, a bag of almonds, and a package of spinach. They were simple foods, nothing extraordinary, yet they represented a glimmer of hope. Maybe, just maybe, this was the answer he had been searching for all along. As Jack left the store and made his way back to his hotel room, he couldn't help but think about the irony of it all. Here he was, a scientist, a researcher, and an expert in his field, yet he was about to test out a solution recommended by a friend who was more famous for launching rockets than solving leg cramps. But if there was one thing Jack had learned in life, it was that sometimes the most unexpected answers came from the most unlikely sources. That night, Jack sat down with his newfound ingredients, prepared a simple meal, and waited. He didn't know it then, but this small, seemingly insignificant moment would soon change his life forever. Jack sat at the small desk in his hotel room, staring at the simple foods in front of him, a bunch of bananas, a bag of almonds, and a package of spinach. He had never felt so skeptical about a piece of advice in his life, especially coming from someone like Elon Musk, who was known for changing the world through rocket science and electric cars, not leg cramps. Yet, as ridiculous as it sounded, Jack couldn't ignore the possibility that this simple combination might actually work. Taking a deep breath, he grabbed one of the ripe bananas. The fruit was soft, almost too perfect, and he couldn't help but chuckle at how such a humble item could be the key to solving his years of muscle pain. He peeled the banana and took a bite, its sweetness and familiar texture offering some comfort, though his mind remained filled with doubts. This has to be a joke, he thought as he chewed slowly. How could something so simple really work? After finishing the banana, Jack moved on to the next item, almonds. They were small but packed with protein and nutrients, magnesium, which, according to his research, was important for muscle function. He popped a few almonds into his mouth, savoring their crunch. It wasn't the most exciting meal, but it was certainly easy. And that was the thing about Elon's recommendation, it wasn't complicated. The last item on his list was spinach. He grabbed a handful and tossed it into a glass of water, thinking it might be the most unappetizing part of the experiment. But what did he have to lose? If these foods had even a small chance of helping him, he was willing to give it a try. He forced himself to drink the spinach-infused water, grimacing slightly at the earthy taste. It wasn't delicious by any means, but he reminded himself it was just one more step in his journey. With his makeshift meal finished, Jack settled into the corner of the room and waited. He wasn't expecting a miracle, not immediately at least. After years of dealing with leg cramps, Jack had grown used to disappointment. He had tried everything, stretching routines, hydrating more, taking magnesium supplements, you name it, and nothing had worked. So why should this be any different? Still, there was something about the simplicity of Elon's advice that felt different. Maybe it was the way Elon spoke so confidently about it, or perhaps it was just the fact that Jack had been at his wits' end for so long that he was willing to try anything. The evening passed without any major changes. Jack went to bed that night just like any other, except for the fact that he had a glimmer of hope tucked away in his mind. Could these 3 foods really make a difference? As Jack drifted off to sleep, he was unsure of what to expect, but the familiar tension in his calf muscles gnawed at him. The cramps always seemed to find him at the worst possible times, and he couldn't shake the nagging thought that they might strike again tonight. Hours later, Jack woke up with a sudden jerk. His calf muscle had tightened in an instant, just like it always did. The familiar sharp pain was enough to send him bolting upright in bed. He gritted his teeth as the cramp intensified, gripping the edge of the mattress to steady himself. Not again, he thought, his frustration building. Not tonight. But something was different this time. As he stretched out his leg, trying to alleviate the pain, he realized the cramp wasn't as severe as usual. The tightness was there, yes, but it wasn't the full-on, muscle-bending agony he had come to expect. It was bearable. With a deep breath, Jack flexed his foot and massaged the cramp. After a few moments, it loosened up, and the sharp pain began to subside. He sat back, blinking in disbelief. Was it possible? Was this the beginning of something? He looked over at the clock. It was 3:30 a.m., but the discomfort in his leg was nearly gone. The cramps usually lasted for much longer, sometimes up to an hour, so the fact that this one faded so quickly left Jack wondering if it could truly be linked to the bananas, almonds, and spinach he had just consumed. The next morning, Jack woke up feeling cautiously optimistic. It wasn't the kind of drastic change he had hoped for, but it was something. He had managed to avoid the usual pain, and that alone felt like progress. He decided to stick with the plan and continue his experiment. Over the next few days, Jack followed Elon's advice to the letter. He ate a banana every morning with his breakfast, snacked on almonds throughout the day, and incorporated spinach into his salads and smoothies. As the days passed, Jack found that his leg cramps became less frequent. And when they did occur, they weren't as intense. It was as though his muscles were responding to the nutrients he had been missing for so long. It wasn't a cure, Jack realized, but it was a huge improvement. The cramping that had once dominated his life was now manageable, and that in itself was a breakthrough. Jack had spent years researching ways to prevent muscle cramps, and now, in just a matter of days, he was seeing results from something as simple as 3 everyday foods. This is crazy, he thought, shaking his head in disbelief. But it's working. By the end of the week, Jack felt a significant difference. His muscles were more relaxed, and his performance at work improved. He could focus better during presentations and meetings without the fear of a cramp interrupting him. And when he went to the gym, the usual soreness and tightness in his muscles felt more like mild discomfort than the crippling spasms he used to endure. But there was still a lingering question in Jack's mind: was this really just a fluke? Could these 3 foods be the ultimate solution, or was it possible that his body was simply adjusting to a new routine? Only time would tell. As Jack sat at his desk, reviewing his notes and making plans for his next project, he couldn't help but think back to that night when Elon had shared his secret. It felt almost too simple to be true, but the results spoke for themselves. And for the first time in years, Jack felt like he was in control again, of his health, his work, and his future. As the days passed, Jack found himself increasingly amazed by the subtle yet undeniable changes occurring in his body. The leg cramps that had once seemed like a constant threat hanging over him were now becoming a distant memory. Sure, they still popped up from time to time, but they were nothing like the crippling spasms that would throw him into a frenzy in the middle of the night. Instead, the cramps were milder, easier to manage, and, most importantly, less frequent. Jack had always prided himself on being a rational person. He was a scientist at heart, trained to look at things objectively, to weigh the evidence before drawing conclusions. But there was something undeniably real about the improvement he was experiencing. He wasn't imagining it. His muscles were truly responding differently. The foods that Elon Musk had recommended were working, and Jack couldn't help but feel a sense of gratitude mixed with disbelief. He was sitting at his desk late one afternoon, reviewing a paper for a conference on human physiology, when he felt a slight twinge in his calf. It wasn't the sharp, searing pain he had grown accustomed to, it was more like a dull reminder, a sign that his muscles were still adjusting. It was almost as if his body was testing the new routine, just to see if Jack was serious about it. Could this really be the solution? Jack thought, running his hand through his hair. Elon wasn't joking. These foods might just be changing everything. After weeks of dealing with inconsistent results from every other method he tried, this sudden consistency was a welcome change. It wasn't a miracle, but it was the closest thing to one that Jack had experienced. He'd never been one to put much stock in quick fixes, especially when it came to his health. He believed in hard work, consistency, and scientific evidence. And yet, here he was, experiencing a shift in his body that seemed almost effortless. That evening, Jack found himself on a call with his best friend, Sam Reynolds. Sam had been there for him through thick and thin, from the long nights of studying for exams in grad school to the many sleepless nights spent chasing down new research ideas. Sam knew Jack better than anyone, and they often talked about the highs and lows of their respective careers. Jack had always shared his frustrations with Sam, especially when it came to his ongoing battle with leg cramps. "So, are you finally going to admit it?" Sam asked, his voice tinged with playful sarcasm. "Elon Musk has cracked the code to your cramping problem, hasn't he?" Jack chuckled. "You know, I hate to say it, but, yeah, he might have. I've been eating bananas, almonds, and spinach for the past week, and I'm already seeing a huge difference. The cramps aren't gone, but they're so much more manageable now." Sam's laughter echoed through the phone. "Wait, hold on. You're telling me you've been eating bananas, almonds, and spinach, and it's actually working? I thought you were the one who always scoffed at those natural remedies." I know, Jack replied, shaking his head even though Sam couldn't see him. "I would have never believed it if I hadn't seen the results myself. But I'm telling you, something about these foods is making a huge difference." Sam paused for a moment. "You really think it's just those foods? I mean, I get it, they're healthy and all, but could it be something else? Maybe your body's just adjusting, or you're just in a better routine overall." Jack leaned back in his chair, reflecting on Sam's words. "Maybe. But even if it's a combination of things, I've never experienced relief like this before. For the first time in years, I'm not afraid that my legs will lock up in the middle of a presentation, or that I'll be woken up in the middle of the night with a cramp so bad I can't move. It's actually a little surreal." Sam let out a low whistle. "Well, I'll be damned. I guess even the most straightforward solutions can work sometimes. You gonna write a book about it? Elon Musk's Secrets for a Cramp-Free Life?" Jack laughed at the suggestion, but the idea lingered in his mind. He was a researcher, after all, and this unexpected solution had piqued his curiosity. Could there really be something to this? Was there a scientific explanation behind why these foods worked so effectively for his muscles? For the next few days, Jack made it a point to incorporate even more of these foods into his daily routine. He experimented with different recipes, mixing the spinach into smoothies, adding bananas to his morning oats, and snacking on almonds throughout the day. It wasn't just about the cramps anymore, it was about discovering whether there was a deeper connection between these foods and the muscle function he had spent his career studying. One evening, while researching the nutritional content of the foods Elon had recommended, Jack stumbled upon something interesting. It wasn't just the magnesium in almonds or the potassium in bananas that could be responsible for the reduction in muscle cramps. There was also a surprising connection between the antioxidants in spinach and muscle recovery. Spinach, it turned out, was rich in nitrates, which could enhance blood flow and oxygen delivery to muscles, promoting better muscle function and reducing the chances of cramping. Jack's eyes widened as he read further. The more he dug into the science behind these foods, the more he realized that there was a legitimate physiological explanation for why they worked. The combination of potassium, magnesium, antioxidants, and nitrates was like a cocktail for muscle health, a fact that he had never fully considered before, despite his extensive knowledge in the field. For the first time, Jack felt like he was on the verge of discovering something groundbreaking, something that could help millions of people who, like him, had struggled with muscle cramps for years. As he sat back and thought about how far he'd come, Jack realized that this wasn't just about leg cramps anymore. It was about understanding the way food could directly influence the body, how the right nutrients could work together in perfect harmony to achieve results. And, as always, Elon Musk had been the catalyst for this revelation. Jack smiled to himself. Who would have thought? It had been 2 weeks since Jack started incorporating bananas, almonds, and spinach into his daily routine, and the improvements had only become more apparent. The cramps were still a part of his life, but they were less frequent and less intense, showing up only when Jack pushed his body too hard or neglected his new diet for a day. It was a far cry from the days when he couldn't even walk a few steps without worrying about a spasm. One Saturday morning, Jack sat down at his kitchen table, a plate of almond butter toast and a green smoothie in front of him. He had grown used to the routine, but there was something new on his mind now, the deeper science behind the relief he was experiencing. As a researcher, he couldn't ignore the questions that were starting to bubble up. Why did these specific foods work so well? What exactly was happening in his body that made this combination so effective? He opened his laptop and began scouring the latest studies on muscle cramps and the nutritional components of his 3 new favorite foods. As he read more about the potassium in bananas and the magnesium in almonds, Jack began to make connections that he hadn't considered before. He'd always known these minerals were important for muscle function, but seeing the results firsthand gave him a new appreciation for their role in preventing muscle cramps. Potassium, he learned, was essential for maintaining proper muscle contraction and preventing spasms. It helped regulate the balance of fluids in cells, ensuring that muscles received the hydration they needed to function properly. When Jack looked back at his history with cramps, it all started to make sense. He had always been underhydrated, not because he wasn't drinking enough water, but because his diet hadn't provided the proper electrolytes. The lack of potassium had likely been a key contributor to his constant leg cramps. Magnesium, found in abundance in almonds, was another critical mineral that played a role in muscle function. Jack already knew magnesium was vital for nerve function, but he hadn't realized just how crucial it was for preventing cramps. Magnesium helped muscles relax after contraction, so a deficiency could cause muscles to tighten and cramp up more easily. He had always been cautious about maintaining his magnesium levels, but it seemed he hadn't been getting enough in his regular diet. The almonds were changing that. Then there was spinach, which Jack had never considered a key player in preventing cramps. He had always seen it as a healthy vegetable, packed with vitamins and minerals, but he hadn't realized just how powerful it was. Spinach was rich in nitrates, compounds that helped improve blood flow by dilating blood vessels. This better circulation helped muscles get more oxygen and nutrients, leading to quicker recovery and fewer cramps. Jack had always thought muscle cramps were a simple issue of hydration and electrolytes, but now, with spinach in his daily routine, he was learning about the role of circulation in preventing muscle tightness. As Jack reviewed the data in front of him, his excitement began to grow. This was no longer just a personal experiment. The science was supporting what he was experiencing. These foods worked. The combination of potassium, magnesium, and nitrates was providing his muscles with the perfect balance of nutrients for better performance and recovery. It was something he had never thought possible, but now, he was living proof that food could have a direct impact on muscle health. He leaned back in his chair and smiled. Jack had always been a firm believer in the power of science to solve problems. And now, it seemed he had found his answer, not in some expensive supplement or intricate workout routine, but in 3 simple, natural foods. This realization filled him with a sense of satisfaction. He had cracked the code. But Jack didn't want to keep this discovery to himself. He knew there were millions of people out there just like him. People who suffered from leg cramps and had tried everything without success. He could be the one to share his findings with the world, to help others the way Elon Musk's advice had helped him. That afternoon, Jack sat down to write a blog post. His fingers danced across the keyboard as he recounted his personal experience, explaining how the combination of bananas, almonds, and spinach had transformed his life. He included the scientific evidence he had uncovered, breaking down how each food contributed to better muscle health. It wasn't just about the relief he had found, it was about the way nutrition had the power to prevent and even reverse muscle cramps. Could this simple knowledge change the lives of others? Jack wondered as he hit publish on his blog. He had never written a post like this before, and he felt a little nervous. But he also felt something else, purpose. For the first time in a long time, Jack felt like he was sharing something important. Something that mattered. Within hours, his post had started to gain traction. People who had dealt with chronic muscle cramps reached out to him, thanking him for sharing his story. Many commented that they had tried the foods Jack recommended and were already feeling a difference. Some shared their own personal experiences with muscle cramps, and others asked Jack for more advice on how to incorporate these foods into their diets. As the days went by, Jack found himself more and more excited about the impact his discovery was having. He started receiving messages from people around the world, Australia, Canada, the UK, who were all experiencing similar results. It seemed like everyone had struggled with muscle cramps at some point in their lives, and Jack had unknowingly tapped into a universal problem. It was clear that his blog was becoming something bigger. His personal story had resonated with so many people, and now Jack was starting to receive requests from fitness influencers, nutritionists, and even doctors who wanted to collaborate. They saw the potential for his message to reach a wider audience, to offer a solution that didn't rely on expensive treatments or prescription medications. Jack's initial hesitation had turned into excitement. He knew he had discovered something life-changing. But the more people reached out to him, the more he realized that this wasn't just about him anymore. It was about helping others take control of their health, just as he had. As Jack sat back and looked at the growing number of messages flooding his inbox, he felt a sense of pride. This wasn't the end of his journey, it was just the beginning. There was so much more to learn, and so many more people to help. The following weeks were a whirlwind for Jack. What had started as a personal journey toward eliminating his frustrating leg cramps had quickly evolved into something bigger. His blog post, which he had thought would reach a few curious readers, had gone viral. He received messages from people across the globe, all sharing similar stories of chronic leg cramps and asking for more advice. At first, Jack had been overwhelmed by the flood of comments and questions. He hadn't anticipated such a response, especially from people who had dealt with muscle cramps for years without finding any solutions. The outpouring of gratitude, mixed with curiosity, was humbling. It felt as though he had stumbled upon something that could truly help people. One afternoon, as Jack sat at his kitchen table sifting through emails, he received an unexpected message. It was from Dr. Emily Thompson, a well-known sports nutritionist who had authored several books on muscle health. Her email was straightforward but intriguing. Hello Jack. I came across your blog post on the connection between bananas, almonds, spinach, and leg cramps. I must say, your findings are fascinating and align with some of the work I've been doing in my own research. I'd love to discuss your findings and see if there's potential for collaboration. Perhaps we could work together on a more comprehensive guide or even a research paper on the subject. Looking forward to hearing from you. Dr. Emily Thompson. Jack sat back, stunned. Dr. Emily Thompson was a respected authority in his field, someone whose work he had read and admired for years. He never imagined that someone with her credentials would take an interest in his blog post, let alone reach out for a collaboration. After a few moments of staring at the screen, Jack gathered his thoughts and quickly responded. Dear Dr. Thompson. Thank you so much for reaching out. I'd be honored to discuss my findings with you further. I've been fascinated by the potential link between these foods and muscle cramps, and I believe there's a lot more to uncover. Let me know when you'd be available for a call, and I'll be happy to share all the details. I'm looking forward to our conversation. Best regards. Jack Miller. He hit send, his heart racing a little. This could be the opportunity of a lifetime. That evening, Jack found himself pacing around his apartment, replaying the email exchange in his mind. He had been passionate about this discovery from the start, but now he realized that he had the chance to make a real impact, possibly even change the way people thought about nutrition and muscle health. The next morning, he received an email from Dr. Thompson's office to schedule a video call. The excitement in Jack's chest grew as the date approached. When the day finally arrived, he set up his laptop, making sure the lighting was just right. He had never been more nervous in his life, but he knew this could be the start of something huge. As the video call began, Dr. Thompson's friendly face appeared on the screen. "Hello, Jack. It's a pleasure to finally meet you virtually," she said, smiling warmly. "I have to admit, I was quite impressed with your blog post. It's rare to see someone with such an eye for detail and a genuine curiosity for understanding how food affects the body. I'm excited to dive deeper into this." Jack smiled back, feeling a rush of both nervousness and excitement. "Thank you, Dr. Thompson. It's an honor to hear that from you. I've been amazed at how simple changes, just adding a few foods to my diet, have made such a difference. I'm glad to have someone of your expertise take an interest in this." She nodded thoughtfully. "You're definitely onto something. There's been a lot of research into muscle cramps and the role that electrolytes play, but the specific combination of these foods and the impact they have on muscle function is a bit of a gray area. Your blog brought up something that could potentially fill in some of those gaps. And what you mentioned about spinach, particularly the nitrates, well, that's an area I've been doing some research in myself." Jack felt his heart skip a beat. This was it, this was the validation he had been hoping for. Dr. Thompson continued, "I believe if we could work together on compiling your personal experience with some scientific studies, we might be able to create a real guide or even a paper that could be useful to both the scientific community and the general public. You've got a unique perspective on this." Jack's mind was racing with possibilities. "That sounds incredible. I'd love to help in any way I can. I've been reading about the science behind these foods, and I feel like there's so much more to discover. I think this could be something that helps so many people." Dr. Thompson smiled. "Absolutely. Let's start by doing a deeper dive into the science behind these foods. We'll need to gather more evidence, perhaps even conduct a few trials to see how well the combination of these nutrients works in a controlled environment. It'll take time, but it could really change the way we think about treating muscle cramps." Jack was almost speechless. This was a far cry from the lone researcher he had been just a few weeks ago, unsure of how to even share his findings with others. Now, he was on the cusp of something much bigger, a collaboration with an expert in the field, with the potential to make a real impact. "We can also think about reaching out to some fitness communities and athletes," Dr. Thompson added. "They're always looking for ways to improve muscle recovery and avoid cramps. We could create a movement around these foods, helping people make informed choices about what they eat to support their muscle health." Jack's excitement only grew. This was more than just his personal journey, it was becoming a mission to help others. People from all over the world were already benefiting from the foods he had recommended, and now, with Dr. Thompson's help, they could take this to the next level. As the call ended, Jack felt a sense of purpose he had never experienced before. This was more than just a solution to his own leg cramps, it was a chance to help millions of people around the world. He had the science. He had the experience. And now, he had the right partner to bring it all together. Jack sat back, a smile tugging at his lips. This was only the beginning. The following week was a blur of activity. Jack was no longer just a man trying to figure out how to end his own muscle cramps, he was now a collaborator on a project that could help millions of people. His inbox was flooded with messages from people who had read his blog post and were eager to learn more about his findings. But amidst the excitement, Jack kept his focus on the next steps in his partnership with Dr. Emily Thompson. They had agreed to meet virtually every few days to discuss the next phases of their project. Dr. Thompson had proposed starting with a research paper that would delve into the science behind the foods Jack had highlighted: bananas, almonds, and spinach. But Jack had a bigger vision. What if we don't just write a paper? Jack suggested during their first call. What if we create a full-scale guide? Something that people can follow, with meal plans, recipes, and success stories. I've already seen how much people are responding to this idea. I think there's real potential to turn this into something more. Dr. Thompson leaned forward, considering his proposal. You know, I was thinking along the same lines. A research paper is definitely important, but a practical guide could reach a much wider audience. The problem with a lot of nutritional advice is that it's too academic and inaccessible. People want something they can follow. Something simple and doable. Jack felt a rush of excitement. He had spent so much time researching muscle cramps that he had almost forgotten the true power of the information, its ability to change lives. A guide wasn't just an idea, it was a way to meet people where they were, to give them the tools they needed to transform their health, just as he had. By the end of the call, they had a plan. They would begin by combining Jack's personal journey and the science behind the foods into a comprehensive guide. Dr. Thompson would handle the technical details, bringing in her expertise on nutrition and muscle health, while Jack would focus on sharing his real-world experience and connecting with readers. The goal was clear: to create a resource that would empower people to take control of their muscle health and prevent cramps without relying on costly treatments or medications. Over the next few weeks, Jack threw himself into the project. He spent hours compiling research, drafting sections of the guide, and revising recipes. His mornings were filled with brainstorming sessions with Dr. Thompson, while his afternoons were spent responding to the growing number of messages from readers who wanted to know more about his story. One evening, as Jack sat in his living room with his laptop open, he received a new message. This one was from Mark Stevens, a professional athlete Jack had admired for years. Mark had seen the blog post and wanted to discuss the potential benefits of the foods Jack had been recommending. Jack couldn't believe his eyes. Mark Stevens was a well-known marathon runner who had broken records and competed in some of the most prestigious races around the world. If Mark was reaching out, it meant something bigger was happening. He quickly typed a response, eager to connect. Hi Mark. Thank you so much for reaching out. I'd love to discuss this further. It's incredible to think that someone like you is interested in the impact of nutrition on muscle health. Let me know when would be a good time for a call. I'm really excited about this. Best regards. Jack Miller. Within hours, Mark had replied, agreeing to hop on a call the following day. Jack couldn't contain his excitement. The project was growing in ways he had never expected. The next day, Jack sat down for a video call with Mark Stevens. The professional athlete's face appeared on the screen, and Jack couldn't help but smile at the surreal moment. Hey Jack, Mark said with a friendly smile. I've been reading up on your findings, and I have to say, it's pretty fascinating. I've dealt with leg cramps during my training, and I know how debilitating they can be. I've tried everything from stretching to supplements, but nothing seems to really work in the long term. When I saw your post, I was curious if you think these foods could help athletes like me. Jack's heart raced with excitement. This was the moment he had been waiting for, validation from someone who understood the importance of muscle health at the highest level. I absolutely think they could help. I've seen it work for myself, and I've had countless people message me saying they're feeling a difference. The beauty of these foods is that they don't just prevent cramps, they provide long-term muscle health benefits. They're full of the nutrients your muscles need to perform at their best. Mark nodded thoughtfully. That's exactly what I'm looking for. I don't want to just manage cramps, I want to prevent them from happening in the first place. I've had to alter my training routine to avoid pushing myself too hard, but I know there's got to be a better way. Jack smiled. That's why I'm so passionate about this. It's not about managing symptoms, it's about addressing the root cause. Potassium, magnesium, and nitrates, these nutrients work together to keep muscles functioning properly. It's about giving your muscles the support they need, rather than just treating the cramps when they happen. Mark's eyes lit up. You're onto something here, Jack. I'd love to try these foods out more seriously and share my experience with you. Maybe even do some testing with my team. Let's see if this could become a part of my regular training routine. Jack's excitement soared. This was more than just a chance to help others, it was an opportunity to bring this message into the world of professional sports. If Mark Stevens, a seasoned athlete, found success with these foods, it could change the way professional athletes approached muscle recovery. I'd be thrilled to have you on board, Jack said, trying to contain his excitement. Your experience could be invaluable in helping others who struggle with the same issues. As the call wrapped up, Mark offered to help promote the guide once it was ready, offering to share it with his fellow athletes and followers. Jack was on cloud nine. This wasn't just a personal project anymore, it was a movement. With new momentum and support from experts and athletes, Jack and Dr. Thompson's guide was beginning to take shape. The next step was clear: finalize the research, create the content, and launch it to the public. But Jack knew that this was just the beginning. What started as an attempt to solve his own problem had now become something that could potentially change the way people approached their muscle health. And he was more ready than ever to see it through. As Jack's partnership with Dr. Emily Thompson gained momentum, the pressure of it all began to weigh on him. What had started as a simple curiosity about his own muscle cramps had quickly blossomed into a full-scale project. There were meetings to attend, emails to respond to, and research to review. What had once been his quiet personal quest now seemed like a movement, and with that came the responsibility of delivering something meaningful. Every morning, Jack woke up with a sense of urgency, eager to get to work. The project had become all-consuming, and while the excitement fueled him, he couldn't ignore the mounting stress that accompanied it. The collaboration with Dr. Thompson was a dream come true, but the expectations were growing. With Mark Stevens now on board, Jack couldn't help but feel a little out of his depth. The first few calls with Dr. Thompson had been full of ideas and excitement, but lately, the tone had shifted. They were moving from broad concepts to actual details, creating meal plans, structuring the guide, and aligning their research with real-world application. And with the scientific side of things becoming more intricate, Jack had found himself constantly learning. There were moments when he doubted his qualifications, wondering if he was really cut out for this. One evening, as Jack sat at his desk surrounded by papers, spreadsheets, and a half-written draft of the guide, he rubbed his temples. The stress was starting to show. He hadn't seen his friends in weeks, hadn't taken a proper break, and hadn't even stepped outside to get some fresh air. Everything was becoming a blur of deadlines and deliverables. He picked up his phone and stared at it for a moment, then dialed the number for his best friend, Ryan. They hadn't spoken in a while, and Jack realized he needed to reconnect, if only for his own sanity. "Hey man, what's up?" Ryan's voice crackled through the line, sounding casual, as if there hadn't been any time between their last conversation. Jack leaned back in his chair, letting out a sigh. "I'm drowning, dude. I've never been this busy in my life. I thought this whole leg cramps thing was just going to be a side project, but now I'm writing a guide, doing interviews, and working with a professional athlete. It's all happening so fast, and I'm struggling to keep up." Ryan chuckled. "Well, it sounds like things are going pretty well, then. I mean, you're not just helping yourself anymore, you're helping a ton of people, right?" "Yeah, but it's a lot more than I bargained for," Jack admitted. "I feel like I'm letting everyone down because I can't keep up with the pace." Dr. Thompson and Mark Stevens both want this to be huge, and I don't want to mess it up. Ryan's tone shifted to something more serious. Jack, you've always had a passion for helping people. I get that it's a lot, but you've got to remember why you started this in the first place. It wasn't to become some nutrition expert or a famous author. It was to help people, starting with yourself. And you've done that. Now you're just sharing it with others. Jack smiled faintly at his friend's words. I know. It's just, a lot of pressure. I don't want to screw this up. You won't. Just take it one step at a time. You've got a solid team behind you, Dr. Thompson's got your back, and Mark Stevens is a huge deal. You don't have to do it all yourself. You're on the right path, man. Just remember that. Jack sat silently for a moment, thinking. Ryan was right, of course. He had built something that was already helping people, and now he had the chance to take it further. He didn't have to do it all on his own. Still, the weight of responsibility lingered. Thanks, man. I needed to hear that. Anytime. And hey, when's the last time you took a break? You need to recharge, dude. Jack laughed softly. I don't even remember. Maybe I'll take a walk tomorrow or something. I just need to step away from the screen for a bit. They talked for a few more minutes, with Ryan reminding Jack to take care of himself, before hanging up. Jack stared at his phone for a moment, his thoughts racing. He felt a little lighter after the conversation, but the weight of the task ahead still loomed large. However, something had shifted. He realized that he didn't need to carry this burden alone. He had people who believed in him, and that mattered more than anything. The next day, Jack made a conscious effort to step away from his desk. He went for a long walk, breathing in the fresh air and letting his mind wander. For the first time in weeks, he felt a sense of calm. The world wasn't going to crumble if he took a break, and maybe, just maybe, the clarity he needed would come from stepping away for a moment. As the days passed, Jack found himself in a better mental space. He reconnected with Dr. Thompson, updating her on his progress. She, too, had been feeling the weight of the project but reassured Jack that they were in this together. They had a solid plan, and they would move forward at the right pace, not pushing too hard. With that reassurance, Jack felt his stress start to lift. The next major milestone was the completion of the research portion. Jack had spent the last few weeks poring over studies and scientific papers on muscle cramps, electrolytes, and nutrition. With Dr. Thompson's guidance, he was beginning to understand the complexities of the topic, and he was excited to see everything coming together. He now felt ready to move forward with the guide, combining his personal experience with expert knowledge. But there was still work to be done. The meals, recipes, and success stories needed to be finalized, and the collaboration with Mark Stevens had yet to take off. As Jack continued to navigate the growing pressure, he reminded himself of one thing: he had already made a difference. And now, it was time to continue that journey, step by step. The air was crisp as Jack sat at his desk early one morning, staring at his computer screen. It had been a few weeks since he'd spoken with Mark Stevens, and their partnership was beginning to take shape. Mark had enthusiastically agreed to trial the foods in his training regimen, and his team had started gathering data. The athletes were seeing notable improvements in both muscle recovery and cramp prevention. It was exactly the kind of result Jack had hoped for, but it came with even more weight on his shoulders. The pressure to make sure everything was perfect was starting to feel almost unbearable. Dr. Thompson had been instrumental in keeping the project on track, offering feedback and encouragement. Together, they had outlined the structure of the guide. It wasn't just a collection of food recommendations, it was a carefully crafted blueprint for a lifestyle that promoted optimal muscle health, recovery, and long-term well-being. The meals and recipes were now a key part of the project. Jack had spent hours in the kitchen, experimenting with different dishes. His personal favorite was a smoothie made from spinach, almond butter, and a banana, with a sprinkle of chia seeds. The nutrients from these foods worked together in a way that Jack now understood deeply, and the results spoke for themselves. But as the guide began to take shape, Jack felt the looming weight of making it a success. He knew that, if done right, it could change how people approached muscle health. But how could he convey all the scientific details in a way that was accessible and actionable? The balance between simplicity and depth seemed impossible to find. He clicked open his email inbox and saw a new message from Dr. Thompson. His heart skipped a beat. He had been waiting for her feedback on the first draft of the guide. If she didn't approve, the entire project would be delayed. With a deep breath, Jack opened the email. Subject: Guide Draft Review. Hi Jack. I've gone through the first draft of the guide, and I'm impressed with the direction it's taking. The blend of personal experience and scientific data is strong, and the recipes look delicious. However, I do think we need to make some tweaks for clarity, especially when it comes to the section on micronutrients. For the chapter on potassium and magnesium, we need to break it down a bit more for the average reader. A simple explanation of why these minerals matter, and how they directly impact muscle function, would be helpful. Perhaps we can include a "what's inside" breakdown on the page to highlight the top nutrients in each of the foods. Let's discuss this further during our next call. Overall, great job. We're almost there. Best. Dr. Emily Thompson. Jack exhaled, feeling a mix of relief and excitement. The feedback was constructive, but the changes required more work. He immediately started drafting revisions to make the information clearer, keeping his target audience in mind, people who were looking for solutions but didn't necessarily have a background in nutrition. The next few days were a whirlwind of work. Jack refined the content, working closely with Dr. Thompson to ensure the information was both scientific and understandable. The recipes took on a life of their own, becoming not just meals, but pathways to a healthier lifestyle. Jack realized he wasn't just creating a guide, he was offering people the opportunity to take control of their health in a tangible way. It wasn't just about ending leg cramps, it was about transforming the way people thought about food and nutrition. On the fourth day after receiving Dr. Thompson's feedback, Jack sat down for another call with her. He had made the changes she suggested and was feeling more confident about the direction of the project. But as the call progressed, Jack noticed something in her tone that he hadn't heard before: urgency. "I've been thinking about something," Dr. Thompson began. "I've been in contact with some colleagues in the medical field, and there's a lot of interest in your work. People want to know more. I think we're at a point where we need to share this with a larger audience." Jack felt a surge of excitement. "You mean, like, publicly?" Dar. Thompson nodded. "Exactly. We've been working in the background for so long, but it's time to take this to the next level. We can't just keep it in the research phase. This guide needs to be out there, helping people. And we can't do it alone anymore. I think it's time we start reaching out to influencers, nutritionists, even fitness coaches who can amplify the message." Jack's heart raced. This was the breakthrough moment he had been waiting for. The validation from Dr. Thompson was huge, but the prospect of going public was both thrilling and terrifying. Could he handle the exposure? What if the response wasn't what he hoped? "I'm all in," Jack said, trying to keep his voice steady. "Let's do it. But how do we start?" "I've already made a few contacts," Dr. Thompson replied. "I've spoken to a couple of fitness influencers who are excited to help spread the word. And we can also pitch this to health bloggers, wellness experts, and media outlets. We'll have to create a solid marketing plan and establish a presence on social media to get the ball rolling." Jack felt his pulse quicken. This was real. It was no longer a side project or a personal journey, it was becoming something much bigger. As much as the idea of putting himself out there scared him, it was time to embrace the opportunity. They spent the next week crafting the perfect pitch and assembling a media kit. They created social media accounts for the project and started sharing snippets of the guide, along with sneak peeks at the recipes and success stories. The response was immediate. People were commenting, sharing, and expressing their gratitude for the practical advice they were receiving. The excitement began to build. But just as everything seemed to be falling into place, Jack received a call from Mark Stevens' team. There had been a minor setback with the athletes' trials. Mark was experiencing mild muscle fatigue and wasn't sure if the foods were having the desired effect. Jack's stomach dropped. What if this was the one thing that could derail everything? He called Dr. Thompson immediately to discuss the situation. Mark's team is worried. They're saying he's not seeing the results we expected. Dr. Thompson's voice was calm but firm. It's not uncommon for dietary changes to take some time. Muscle adaptation doesn't happen overnight. I think we need to give it more time and adjust his training routine to account for the new dietary changes. Jack nodded, grateful for her level-headedness. You're right. We can't rush this. Let's keep supporting him and focus on the long-term benefits. The next few days were filled with updates from Mark's team, but Jack remained confident. This was a journey, and as long as they stayed true to their mission, they would succeed. And in the meantime, the guide was gaining momentum. People were sharing their experiences, the recipes were getting rave reviews, and Jack felt like he was finally on the right path. But the real breakthrough, he realized, wasn't just in the guide, it was in the journey itself. And as the project expanded, Jack knew one thing for sure: this was just the beginning. The morning of the official public launch, Jack woke up to an inbox flooded with emails and messages. The guide, End Leg Cramps Fast, a nutritional approach, was finally live. His website had gone live at midnight, and by 8 a.m., the first batch of orders was coming through. He had worked with Dr. Thompson and a small team of experts to ensure the website was ready, and they had arranged for a small initial marketing push through social media influencers and health bloggers. For a moment, Jack stared at the incoming notifications, overwhelmed by the sheer volume of attention. This wasn't just a project anymore, it was a movement, and it felt like the entire world was watching. He got up and paced around his apartment, trying to calm his nerves. It had taken months of hard work, sleepless nights, and sacrifices. All of a sudden, it was all out there. What if people didn't like it? What if they didn't find it helpful? Could his guide really make the difference he hoped for, or was it all just wishful thinking? Jack took a deep breath and decided to focus on the positive. The response so far had been largely encouraging. His social media posts were receiving likes and shares, and the reviews were starting to trickle in. He had to trust in the process. At 10 a.m., he had his first official call with Dr. Thompson since the launch. They had agreed to check in and assess how the project was being received by the public. Jack dialed her number, trying to shake off the anxiousness that had built up over the past few hours. "Hi, Jack. How's everything going?" Dr. Thompson answered, her voice as upbeat as ever. Jack tried to sound calm, but he knew it was clear in his voice. I'm a little nervous, to be honest. The site's live, the orders are coming in, and people are posting about it. But it still feels like a lot." Dr. Thompson laughed gently. "That's completely normal. You've poured so much into this project, it's only natural to feel that weight. But from what I'm seeing, you're already getting great feedback. Keep focusing on the positive, and everything will work out." Jack ran his hand through his hair, the familiar tension building in his shoulders. "Yeah, the feedback has been good. But I've been seeing some questions come up that I wasn't expecting. People are asking for more in-depth information on specific nutrients, and I don't know if we can fit all of that into the guide without making it too overwhelming. I'm starting to feel like we may have missed a few things." Dr. Thompson paused for a moment. "That's a good point. When you're reaching a wider audience, you'll always get questions and requests for more detail. But that's actually a good sign. It means people are engaging with the content, and they want to know more. We've already done a great job simplifying things for the average person, but perhaps it's time to consider creating a supplementary resource, like an extended guide or even a Q&A section on the website. We can keep it simple, but give them the depth they're craving." Jack felt a wave of relief wash over him. Dr. Thompson had always been good at putting things in perspective. "That's a great idea. A Q&A section could really help, and I think a follow-up guide would be perfect." "Exactly. This is just the beginning, Jack. We're laying the foundation for something that could grow exponentially. You're going to face bumps along the way, but don't let them derail you. Use the feedback as a tool to improve, not a reason to second-guess everything." Jack nodded, feeling more grounded with each passing minute of the conversation. "Thanks, Emily. You've really helped put things in perspective." After the call, Jack took a break and stepped outside for a short walk. He had been holed up in his apartment for days, working on the launch and fine-tuning the details. The fresh air felt good, and it allowed him to process everything. As he walked through the city streets, Jack couldn't help but think about the larger impact of the guide. What if this wasn't just about ending leg cramps? What if they could start a conversation about nutrition, health, and wellness on a bigger scale? The guide was just the beginning of a movement, a way to help people take control of their health, one meal at a time. By the time Jack returned to his apartment, the feedback had started pouring in. Social media mentions were flooding in faster than he could keep up with, and people were starting to share their own success stories. He saw one post from a woman named Sarah who had suffered from chronic muscle cramps for years. She had tried everything, but after following the dietary guidelines in the book, her cramps had significantly decreased. Jack felt a deep sense of pride as he read the post. This was why he had started the project in the first place, to make a real difference in people's lives. He felt his heart swell with gratitude for the people who trusted him enough to give his guide a chance. However, not all of the feedback was positive. As expected, there were some skeptics. A few people raised concerns about the science behind the guide. Some questioned whether the recommendations were backed by enough clinical studies. Others criticized the recipes, claiming they weren't realistic or practical for someone with a busy lifestyle. Jack tried not to take it personally. The truth was, no matter how much he tried to make the guide perfect, it would never be universally loved. There would always be critics. What mattered was that the majority of the feedback was positive, and they were still in the early stages. There was room for improvement. A few days later, Jack sat down with Dr. Thompson again for a follow-up call. They had received both positive and negative feedback, and it was time to take action. "Jack, I've been reading through some of the feedback," Dr. Thompson said. "The criticism isn't uncommon, but it does highlight a few areas we can improve. We should address the concerns about clinical evidence and maybe include a few more references to studies in the updated version. As for the recipes, maybe we could offer alternatives that cater to different lifestyles. Some people want quick meals, others want more elaborate ones. Let's meet the audience where they are." Jack agreed, feeling more confident now that they had a clear path forward. "That makes sense. We can tweak the guide and make the next edition even better. I'll make sure we address the concerns about evidence and update the recipes to reflect a wider variety of needs." With the project continuing to grow, Jack felt the weight of responsibility, but he also felt proud. They were building something meaningful, and every challenge was an opportunity to refine and improve. This was just the beginning. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? The next few weeks were a whirlwind of activity. Jack's inbox continued to flood with emails, orders, reviews, questions, and, of course, criticism. As the project gained traction, Jack found himself buried in the details. The feedback was overwhelmingly positive, but there were still some lingering concerns that needed addressing. As much as he had hoped for a smooth ride, the reality of managing a rapidly growing project hit him like a freight train. Thompson and Mark Stevens had both been invaluable in providing perspective, but Jack was learning that growth meant more than just product development, it also meant leadership, communication, and the delicate art of managing expectations. He had initially thought that once the guide was launched, the work would be done, but now he realized that the real work had only just begun. "Jack, we've got a problem," Emily said one morning during their weekly check-in call. "The recipes section is getting a lot of feedback, and while the new versions look great, they're not catering to the vegan audience we discussed. People are asking for plant-based alternatives, and I think we're missing an opportunity." Jack ran a hand through his hair, his mind racing. They had added a few vegan-friendly recipes, but Emily was right, there weren't enough to satisfy the growing number of plant-based eaters who were following the guide. And this wasn't just a small demographic, the vegan movement had been growing exponentially, and Jack realized they needed to be inclusive if they wanted to truly reach a wide audience. "You're right," Jack said, his voice a little shaky as he tried to grasp the new direction they needed to take. "I think we underestimated the importance of that segment. I'll start working on new recipes right away. We should have more variety, smoothie bowls, vegan protein-packed meals, and even snack ideas. It's not just about accommodating them, it's about making them feel seen." "I agree. Let's aim for a new chapter specifically dedicated to vegan options. And perhaps a section focused on the most common nutritional gaps in plant-based diets," Emily suggested. Jack nodded, feeling both overwhelmed and inspired. He knew this wasn't going to be a quick fix, but it was the right move. "Okay, I'll get started on it. But we'll also need to adjust the marketing to make sure we're highlighting this update. I don't want to lose sight of our original audience, but I think this is an important next step." The changes were immediate. Jack recruited a few nutritionists and chefs who specialized in vegan and plant-based meals. They dove into creating recipes that were not only aligned with the nutritional principles of the guide but also delicious and easy to prepare. The vegan recipes were carefully crafted to provide the essential vitamins and minerals needed for muscle health, particularly the often missed nutrients like iron, calcium, and vitamin B12. As Jack and his team worked on the updates, they also decided to create a new blog series that focused on breaking down the science behind the foods and how they impacted the body, particularly in relation to muscle cramps. They brought in guest bloggers from the nutrition and fitness world to guest write articles, providing more depth and variety to the website's content. But it wasn't just about adding content. Jack found himself grappling with a deeper issue: how to manage his time and energy. As the project expanded, so did the number of people who relied on him for guidance. Between the constant communication with his team, the flood of feedback from customers, and the ongoing development of the guide, Jack began to realize that he was burning out. One afternoon, while reviewing social media posts about the guide, Jack noticed a message from Mark Stevens. It was brief but pointed: "Jack, I need to talk. We've got some new concerns about the trial results. Let's chat." The message caused a knot to form in Jack's stomach. Mark had been a huge supporter of the project from the beginning, but Jack could sense that something wasn't right. He immediately scheduled a call for later that day. When the call started, Mark's tone was heavier than usual. "Jack, we've been seeing some mixed results with the athletes. Some of them are improving, but others are still experiencing muscle cramps despite following the guide. I don't know if this is something we're missing or if the diet just isn't enough to combat cramps in all cases." Jack tried to stay calm. This wasn't the first time they'd hit a roadblock, and he knew that setbacks were part of the journey. "I understand. I've been working with Emily on some of the adjustments to the guide, especially regarding plant-based diets. I think we need to look deeper into individual factors, like training intensity and hydration. I don't believe the guide is a one-size-fits-all solution." Mark agreed. "Yeah, I've been thinking the same thing. The athletes' schedules vary, their recovery protocols are different, and it's hard to say that just one nutritional change can solve everything. We might need to look at a broader approach." Jack felt a rush of insight. This was it, this was the answer. The guide needed to be more than just a set of foods and recipes. It needed to offer a comprehensive approach to wellness that included sleep, hydration, and recovery techniques. The more he thought about it, the clearer the vision became. "I think you're right," Jack said, a sense of clarity washing over him. "We need to expand the scope of the guide. We can introduce new chapters focused on training recovery techniques, hydration tips, and sleep strategies. And we can provide more personalized guidance so people understand that there's no one-size-fits-all solution." Mark's tone lightened. "That sounds like exactly what we need. Let's get to work on it. I'll pass the idea along to the team." After the call, Jack immediately called Emily. He was brimming with excitement, his mind racing with new ideas. "Emily, I just talked to Mark. We need to expand the guide to cover more than just nutrition. We need a whole-body approach, hydration, sleep, recovery techniques. It'll be a more comprehensive solution to muscle health, and it'll allow people to customize their approach based on their individual needs." Emily's voice was full of enthusiasm. "That's an excellent idea, Jack. This could take us to the next level." Jack spent the next few weeks revising the guide, adding new chapters on hydration strategies, the importance of sleep, and the recovery techniques that athletes swore by. He even created downloadable resources like a personalized recovery plan that users could adapt based on their specific goals. As the updates rolled out, the feedback was overwhelmingly positive. People appreciated the deeper dive into the science behind muscle recovery and the holistic approach to wellness. But Jack knew there was still a long road ahead. The guide had evolved into something far bigger than he had initially imagined, and the challenges were only just beginning. The next few weeks felt like a blur to Jack. The excitement of the initial success had quickly been replaced by the overwhelming pressure to keep up with the rapid pace of growth. The feedback was constant, both from users and the team, and Jack found himself juggling more responsibilities than he ever anticipated. It was as if the project was living its own life, and Jack was barely keeping up with its demands. The expansion of the guide had been a massive undertaking. The new sections on hydration, sleep, and recovery were well received, but with each edition came more questions, more adjustments, and more pressure. Jack spent late nights at his desk, revising content, checking in with his team, and trying to keep up with the social media posts that were pouring in. He knew the team depended on him to steer the ship, but sometimes, he wondered if he was losing sight of the reason he started this journey in the first place. One evening, as he sat in his apartment reviewing some of the newly added content, his phone buzzed with a message from Emily. "Jack, we need to talk. Can we hop on a call in 10? Jack felt a pang of anxiety. They had been making good progress, but the last thing he needed was another problem to solve. Still, he knew that Emily was someone who always had the team's best interests at heart, so he pushed aside his feelings of frustration and dialed her number. "Hey, Emily, what's up?" Jack greeted, trying to sound calm despite the storm brewing inside him. "I've been looking over the new sections," Emily said, her voice steady but with a hint of concern. "The content looks great, but I'm worried about the level of detail. We've added so much information, too much, in fact. I think it might be overwhelming for some people. The last thing we want is to turn the guide into a textbook." Jack ran his hand through his hair, feeling the weight of the responsibility pressing down on him. He had been so focused on making the guide as comprehensive as possible that he hadn't considered how it might be perceived by the average reader. The last thing he wanted was for people to feel overwhelmed or discouraged by the amount of information they had to process. "I didn't realize it had become that much," Jack admitted, his voice quiet. "We were just trying to make it more useful, more complete." "But I see what you mean." Emily sighed. "I know you've put everything into this project, Jack. But sometimes, less is more. We've already simplified the content as much as we can, and adding more may start to feel like we're burying people in information. Let's focus on giving them what they really need, without overwhelming them." Jack knew she was right. It was a tough pill to swallow. He had been so determined to offer a comprehensive, all-encompassing solution that he had overlooked the simple fact that people needed clarity, not complexity. "You're absolutely right," Jack said, feeling a sense of clarity. "I think I've lost sight of the bigger picture. We need to make sure the guide remains accessible to everyone, not just those who are deep into health and nutrition." Emily's tone softened. "I know this is a tough call, but I believe this will actually help the project in the long run. We want people to be able to pick up the guide, implement the changes easily, and start seeing results without getting bogged down by too much information. Let's trim it down, make the key points clearer, and add a section for those who want more detailed info at the end. This way, everyone wins." Jack agreed. It was hard, but it was the right move. As much as he wanted to make the guide everything to everyone, he had to remember that simplicity and accessibility were key. He couldn't do it all at once, but he could continue improving the guide incrementally. "Thanks, Emily. I really needed to hear that," Jack said, grateful for her perspective. "I'll go back to the drawing board and start simplifying. I'll have an updated version ready in a few days." With the call ending, Jack sat in silence for a moment, reflecting on the conversation. He had put so much pressure on himself to create something groundbreaking, something that would change lives overnight. But Emily's words had made him realize that true progress didn't happen in a vacuum. It wasn't about doing everything perfectly, it was about listening to feedback, making improvements, and understanding that growth was a process, not an immediate result. The next few days were a whirlwind of revisions. Jack and Emily worked together, carefully trimming down the sections that were becoming too dense and ensuring that the core message was front and center. They simplified the scientific language, broke up long paragraphs, and made the recipes even easier to follow. They added a resources section at the end of the guide for readers who wanted more detailed information, and made sure that the guide's tone remained motivating and accessible. By the time the updated version of the guide was ready, Jack felt a sense of accomplishment. It was still comprehensive, but now it felt streamlined and approachable. He was excited to see how the new version would be received by their audience. But even as Jack felt a sense of pride in the revisions, a gnawing sense of doubt lingered in the back of his mind. Was this enough? Could he keep up with the growing demands of the project? Was he still the same person who had started this journey, or had the weight of the responsibility changed him? One evening, after wrapping up a long day of work, Jack sat down on his couch with a glass of water. He pulled up the latest social media posts about the guide, reading through the reviews. Most of the feedback was positive, with many users commenting on how much easier the guide had become to follow. But there were still some critiques. Mostly about the lack of certain meal options and a few concerns about how some recipes didn't align with individual dietary needs. Jack sighed, feeling both relieved and anxious at the same time. He had hoped the changes would be enough to satisfy the critics, but he knew that there would always be people who wanted more. It was impossible to please everyone, and yet, he still found himself wanting to try. He leaned back in his chair, running a hand over his face. The pressure was mounting, and for the first time in a while, he questioned whether he was cut out for the demands of leadership. It was easy to get lost in the endless to-do lists, the meetings, and the emails. He had started this project to help people, but somewhere along the way, it felt like he had become consumed by the pressure to succeed. As Jack sat in silence, a thought crossed his mind: maybe the key wasn't about solving every problem at once. Maybe it was about embracing the journey, with all its ups and downs, and learning to trust that the process was just as important as the final product. With that realization, Jack closed his laptop and leaned back in his chair, allowing himself a moment of stillness. He had a long road ahead of him, but he knew now that it was okay to take it one step at a time. It was late afternoon when Jack sat down in his favorite cafe, staring blankly at his laptop screen. The sun streamed through the windows, casting a warm glow over the worn wooden table. The cafe was bustling with energy, but for Jack, everything felt oddly still. His mind raced with thoughts of the project, the new updates to the guide, and the never-ending feedback. But something was missing. He took a deep breath and rubbed his temples. It had been weeks since he'd taken a break. His days had become a blur of emails, calls, and meetings, and the weight of managing the guide's success had started to chip away at his enthusiasm. The project had grown far beyond his expectations, and now it felt like an endless cycle of updates, changes, and adjustments. Every new success brought with it new challenges, and the constant pressure was starting to take a toll. It was then that he noticed a message from Dr. Thompson on his phone. "Jack, I've been meaning to check in. You've been working non-stop, and I think it's time to take a step back. Let's catch up soon." Jack hesitated, fingers hovering over the keyboard. It wasn't like him to ignore messages from Dr. Thompson. But the idea of taking a step back felt impossible. There was so much to do. The guide was expanding rapidly, the audience was growing, and Jack felt responsible for every detail. If he stopped now, what would happen? Would it all come crashing down? Yet, as he stared at the message, something shifted in him. He realized that perhaps Dr. Thompson was right. He hadn't taken a break in months. His constant focus on the project had isolated him from his friends, his family, and even himself. It was time to reassess his priorities. Jack quickly typed a response. "Dr. Thompson, I'd love to catch up. Let's talk tomorrow. I think you're right, maybe I need to slow down a bit." As soon as he sent the message, a sense of relief washed over him. He wasn't sure what the conversation would bring, but for the first time in a while, he felt like he was taking a step toward regaining control of his life. The next day, Jack sat down with Dr. Thompson over a video call. He hadn't spoken to him in a few weeks, and as always, Dr. Thompson's calm demeanor and wise perspective were a welcome relief. "How are you, Jack?" Dr. Thompson asked, his voice warm yet knowing. Jack sighed deeply. "I'm doing well in some ways, but I'm starting to feel the weight of it all. The project is growing, and I'm just trying to keep up. It feels like there's always something new to do, and I'm always on the clock." Dr. Thompson nodded. "I can imagine. It's easy to get caught up in the momentum of a project like this. But the thing is, Jack, you can't pour from an empty cup. You're the heart and soul of this project, and if you burn out, it's going to affect everything." Jack looked down, feeling a pang of truth in Dr. Thompson's words. He had spent so much time trying to make the guide perfect that he'd neglected his own well-being. He hadn't gone for a run in weeks, barely had time to eat meals properly, and had all but abandoned his social life. "I know," Jack admitted. "I've been so focused on making everything work that I haven't taken time for myself. I don't even know the last time I took a full day off." Dr. Thompson smiled gently. "It's understandable, but it's important to take a step back. You need to set boundaries, not just with the project, but with yourself. You can't do everything, and that's okay. Sometimes, the best way to move forward is to pause and recharge. You'll come back stronger and more focused." Jack nodded, absorbing the advice. "I guess I've been afraid that if I slow down, things will fall apart. There's so much I want to accomplish, and I don't want to disappoint anyone." "You won't disappoint anyone," Dr. Thompson reassured him. "The people who believe in the project also believe in you. And they understand that to do your best work, you need to take care of yourself. This isn't a sprint, it's a marathon. Pace yourself." As they continued their conversation, Jack began to feel a sense of clarity he hadn't felt in weeks. Dr. Thompson was right, he needed to take care of himself, both physically and mentally. The project could wait, but his health couldn't. That afternoon, Jack made a decision. He would take the next weekend off. He would turn off his phone, ignore the emails, and spend the time recharging. It was a small step, but it was a start. He needed to reconnect with the world outside the screen, the real world where he could laugh, relax, and remember why he started this journey in the first place. The weekend came, and Jack followed through on his plan. He unplugged from work and took a day-long hike through the nearby mountains. The fresh air, the sound of the trees swaying, and the peaceful solitude gave him a sense of calm he hadn't realized he was missing. For the first time in months, he could think clearly without the constant hum of the project in the back of his mind. That evening, Jack met up with his old friend, Noah, for dinner. They hadn't seen each other in a while, and Jack was grateful for the chance to reconnect. "So, what's going on with you these days?" Noah asked, taking a sip of his drink. "I've been seeing your name pop up everywhere." Jack smiled, the tension in his shoulders easing. "Yeah, the project has been growing fast. It's been amazing, but also a lot to handle. I think I've been so focused on making it work that I've been neglecting the other parts of my life." Noah raised an eyebrow. "Sounds like you're getting a bit of a wake-up call." Jack chuckled. "Yeah, you could say that. I'm realizing that I can't keep working at this pace and still be happy. I've got to find balance." Noah nodded thoughtfully. "That's the key, man. You've got to keep your mind, body, and spirit in sync. If one of them falls out of balance, the others follow." Jack took a moment to reflect on Noah's words. He had been so driven by the idea of success that he had forgotten the importance of living a balanced life. He wasn't just building a business, he was building a life. And if he didn't take care of that life, nothing else would matter. The next day, Jack returned to work with renewed energy. He was still as committed as ever to the guide and its mission, but now he understood that his well-being was just as important. He set boundaries for himself, ensuring that he had time to relax, exercise, and spend with loved ones. Slowly but surely, he found that by giving himself permission to take breaks, he was actually more productive, creative, and focused when he returned to work. The project continued to grow, but Jack now understood that the journey wasn't just about achieving success, it was about finding joy in the process, taking care of himself along the way, and learning how to balance ambition with self-care. As the weeks passed, Jack felt a renewed sense of purpose. His decision to take time for himself had paid off in more ways than one. Not only did he feel more energized and focused, but he was also seeing the guide in a new light. His creativity had returned, and he began thinking about ways to expand the project without sacrificing the clarity and simplicity that had made it successful. One morning, as Jack sat in his office sipping a cup of coffee, his phone buzzed with an email notification. It was from Sarah, his lead content strategist. "Jack, we've received some interesting feedback from our community. Several users have expressed interest in a more personalized approach to the guide, something they can customize based on their specific needs. What do you think?" Jack sat back in his chair, considering the idea. A personalized version of the guide could be a game-changer, allowing users to tailor the content to their individual health goals. It would add an interactive element, making the guide not just a static resource, but something that could evolve with each user's progress. This was exactly the kind of innovation Jack had been looking for. The thought of giving users more control over their experience excited him. But he knew it wouldn't be easy. The guide was already complex enough, and adding customization features could introduce new challenges. He quickly shot an email back to Sarah. "That sounds like a fantastic idea, Sarah. Let's brainstorm how we can make it work. We'll need to ensure that it's easy to use and doesn't overwhelm people. Let's set up a meeting later today to discuss." The meeting went smoothly. After some brainstorming, the team came up with a plan to introduce a customizable version of the guide. The idea was to create a user-friendly questionnaire that would help users assess their current habits, goals, and preferences. Based on their responses, the guide would generate a tailored version of the content, highlighting the areas that were most relevant to them. It was ambitious, but Jack was excited by the possibilities. This feature could be the next big step in the project's evolution. It would not only enhance the user experience but also make the guide feel even more personalized and empowering. But as the team worked on implementing the new feature, Jack was reminded of the delicate balance he had been working to maintain. He couldn't let this new addition turn into another overwhelming task. He needed to ensure that this new feature would still align with the core values of the guide: simplicity, accessibility, and clarity. He set aside time every day to check in with the team, making sure that they were staying focused on their goals while keeping the user experience at the forefront of the design. Jack also began to delegate more tasks to the team, empowering them to take ownership of specific elements of the project. It was a gradual shift, but Jack realized that to scale the project successfully, he couldn't do everything himself. He had to trust his team and give them the autonomy to make decisions. One evening, as Jack was reviewing the latest iteration of the customizable guide, he received a call from Emily. "Hey, Jack, how's everything going with the new features?" Emily asked. "It's going well. We've made a lot of progress, and I'm excited about the possibilities. We're aiming for a more personalized experience for our users, something that will allow them to tailor the content to their own needs. But it's a bit tricky. We're walking a fine line between making it customizable without overwhelming people." Emily's voice sounded thoughtful. "That's a fine balance, for sure. But I think you're onto something big here. Giving users the power to personalize their journey could make the guide feel more meaningful to them. It's not just about telling them what to do, it's about empowering them to take control of their own health. It's a smart move." Jack smiled, feeling reassured by Emily's support. "Thanks, Emily. I appreciate that. I just don't want to overcomplicate things. I've learned the hard way that simplicity is key." "Exactly," Emily agreed. "But I think this customization feature could actually streamline the process for people. It's like giving them a shortcut to success, without the guesswork." Jack nodded. Emily was right. As long as they kept the user experience at the forefront, the new feature could provide a more streamlined and personalized journey for each user. It was all about enhancing the core message of the guide, helping people improve their lives, one step at a time. As the months went by, the customizable guide began to take shape. The team worked tirelessly to refine the questionnaire, ensuring that it was intuitive and easy to navigate. They tested the new features with a small group of users, gathering feedback and making adjustments along the way. Jack was impressed by how smoothly everything was coming together. The feedback from the test group was overwhelmingly positive. Users appreciated the ability to tailor the guide to their specific needs, and many mentioned that the personalized approach made them feel more motivated to stick with the program. But as the project continued to grow, so did the challenges. Jack found himself facing more pressure to keep up with the expanding demands. The customizable guide was just one of many features that needed attention, and the constant influx of emails, messages, and meetings sometimes felt overwhelming. One evening, as Jack sat in his office reviewing the latest user data, he felt a familiar wave of anxiety creeping in. The pressure to deliver the best possible experience for every user was becoming a heavy burden. He had worked so hard to build something meaningful, but now it seemed like the more successful the guide became, the more there was to manage. Jack took a deep breath and leaned back in his chair. He realized that this was another moment where he needed to trust his team. He had empowered them to take on more responsibility, and now it was time for him to let go even more. He picked up his phone and called Emily. "Hey, Emily," Jack began, his voice a little quieter than usual. "I'm feeling a bit overwhelmed with everything. I know we've got the right team in place, but I'm struggling to keep up with all the moving pieces." Emily paused, her voice steady. "I get it, Jack. This is a big project, and it's easy to feel like you have to control everything. But remember, you don't have to do it all yourself. You've built an amazing team, and they're here to help you. You just need to trust them." Jack closed his eyes for a moment, absorbing her words. "You're right. I need to delegate more. I can't keep trying to do everything on my own." "Exactly," Emily said. "And don't forget to take care of yourself. You've been doing great, but you can't pour from an empty cup. Let's continue moving forward together, one step at a time. Jack smiled, feeling a sense of relief. He knew that Emily was right. He had come a long way, but to keep growing the project, he needed to continue trusting his team and taking care of himself. Only then would he be able to create something truly sustainable. The next day, Jack made a conscious decision to delegate more tasks and give his team more responsibility. He scheduled regular check-ins with Emily and Sarah to ensure the project was on track, but he also made time for himself, time to step away from work, to recharge, and to enjoy life outside of the guide. And with that, the project continued to evolve, not just because of Jack's vision, but because of the strength of the team behind him. Jack had found a new rhythm, one that balanced innovation with self-care, creativity with delegation. The project was becoming everything he had dreamed of, and more. The guide had come a long way since Jack first launched it. It was no longer just a simple resource, it had become a movement. A movement that resonated deeply with people all over the world. The new customizable feature had been a game-changer, and the feedback continued to flood in from users who felt empowered by the personalized experience. For the first time, Jack felt that his work was genuinely changing lives, but with this success came a new set of challenges. As the user base grew, Jack began to feel the weight of the responsibility that came with it. The pressure to keep innovating, expanding, and staying ahead of the competition was relentless. His inbox was constantly filled with inquiries, suggestions, and partnership offers from businesses eager to collaborate. There were sponsorships to consider, media interviews to schedule, and influencers reaching out, eager to promote the guide. Yet, as Jack sat in his office one afternoon, reviewing the latest expansion plans, something didn't feel right. The excitement of growth was tempered by a nagging feeling that he was losing sight of the original vision, the reason he had started this project in the first place. He leaned back in his chair, staring out the window at the city below. The sun was setting, casting a golden hue across the buildings, but for Jack, everything felt distant. He'd spent so much time running the project that he hadn't paused to reflect on the bigger picture in a while. What was the ultimate purpose behind the guide? Was it still about helping people improve their lives, or had it become something else, a business, a brand, a product to scale? Jack's phone buzzed, interrupting his thoughts. It was a message from Noah, his old friend who had always been a grounding force in his life. "Hey Jack, been thinking about you. Let's catch up soon. I know things are moving fast with the guide, but I'd love to hear how you're feeling about everything." Jack smiled at the message. He hadn't had a real conversation with Noah in months. Between work and the constant demands of the project, he had barely found time to reconnect with anyone outside of the business world. He typed a quick reply. "Thanks, Noah. I'd really like that. Let's meet up tomorrow." The next day, Jack and Noah met at their usual spot, a small, cozy cafe where they used to meet for coffee and catch up on life. The cafe hadn't changed in years, and that sense of familiarity was exactly what Jack needed. As they sat down, Jack could feel the weight of the last few months lifting slightly. He had missed moments like this, moments that reminded him of who he was before the guide became a full-time job. "How's everything going?" Noah asked, settling into his chair. Jack sighed and ran a hand through his hair. "It's going well, but I don't know. The more the guide grows, the more pressure I feel to keep up with it all. It's like it's becoming something bigger than I imagined. I want to help people, but I also don't want to lose sight of why I started this in the first place." Noah nodded, understanding exactly where Jack was coming from. "Yeah, that's the tricky part. You've built something great, but sometimes growth can start to feel like a juggernaut, you don't know where it's headed, and you're just trying to keep it from running you over." "Exactly," Jack said. "It's like there's this constant push to do more, expand more, and I'm worried that we're starting to lose the heart of the project. I've been so focused on building a brand that I haven't even thought about the people I'm trying to help. I don't want it to become just another business or product." Noah took a thoughtful sip of his coffee. "I get it. You're passionate about the guide because you know it's making a difference. But you can't lose sight of that impact in the quest for growth. The more you expand, the more important it is to stay grounded in your values. Otherwise, it's easy to lose the essence of what made the project meaningful in the first place. Jack stared into his coffee cup, reflecting on Noah's words. I think that's it, he said slowly. I'm so caught up in the hustle that I've forgotten why this project matters. It's about the people who are using it, the lives it's changing. It's not about the numbers or the recognition. I need to go back to that. Noah smiled. It's easy to lose that perspective, especially when you're building something that's growing so quickly. But the thing is, people can tell when a project is authentic. They can feel when it's about more than just the bottom line. And that's why they're drawn to it in the first place. Jack's mind began to clear. Noah's advice resonated deeply with him. He didn't need to chase endless growth or try to become the next big thing in the health and wellness space. What mattered was continuing to serve his audience in a meaningful way. If he could stay true to the core mission, helping people live healthier lives, one step at a time, then everything else would fall into place. Thanks, Noah, Jack said, his voice more confident now. I needed to hear that. I think I've been too focused on the future instead of the present. I need to refocus on the impact the guide is having right now and not get distracted by all the noise around growth. Noah nodded. You've got this, Jack. You've built something that has real value. Just keep your eyes on what matters most, the people you're helping. That afternoon, Jack sat down with his team to revisit the project's mission. Together, they brainstormed ways to ensure that the guide remained true to its original purpose, even as they explored new features and opportunities for growth. They decided to focus on enhancing the quality of the content and ensuring that every new addition was meaningful and aligned with the guide's core principles. Jack also made the decision to scale back some of the partnerships and collaborations that felt like distractions. He wanted to maintain the integrity of the project and avoid turning it into a marketing machine. His goal was to create lasting, meaningful change for the people using the guide, not just make a profit. As the team moved forward with this renewed focus, Jack felt a sense of calm he hadn't experienced in months. He knew there would still be challenges ahead, but he also knew that the guide was something bigger than any individual. It was a tool for transformation, and as long as they kept their eyes on the impact they were making, they would continue to succeed. The success of the customizable guide had propelled the project into new territory. It was no longer a small-scale operation run by Jack and a handful of passionate individuals. The guide had grown into a recognized brand, with thousands of users around the world. Jack couldn't help but feel proud of what he and his team had built, but with that success came an increasing number of challenges. The biggest issue on Jack's mind now was team expansion. The workload was mounting, and while Jack had always prided himself on being hands-on, he knew that in order for the guide to keep growing, he needed to bring in more help. But as with everything else in the project, he didn't want to rush this decision. It was crucial that he found the right people who shared his vision for the guide, people who were as committed to its mission as he was. Jack sat in his office, his eyes scanning the resumes of potential candidates. He'd gone through dozens of applications in the past few weeks, but there was something about this process that made him nervous. The idea of bringing in new people who didn't understand the heart of the project made him uneasy. He was used to a small, tight-knit team where everyone was deeply invested in the mission. Could he maintain that close-knit culture with more people? His phone buzzed with a message from Sarah. Hey Jack, I've been thinking a lot about the new team members. I know we need more hands, but we also need to make sure we're hiring the right people. How do you feel about the current pool of candidates? Jack sighed as he replied. I'm torn. There are some great resumes here, but I'm worried about losing the personal touch. We've built something special, and I don't want that to change just because we expand. Sarah's reply was quick. I get it. It's a big decision, but I think we can find people who share our values. We just need to be really careful about the culture we're building. That was exactly it. Jack didn't want the guide to become just another company. He wanted to ensure that anyone who joined the team would be as dedicated to the mission as everyone already involved. It wasn't just about hiring for skills, it was about finding people who understood the bigger picture and would work together to make it a reality. That afternoon, Jack scheduled a meeting with Sarah, Noah, and Emily. It was time to talk about the future of the team, and he needed their input. As they gathered around the conference table, Jack laid out his concerns. "I've been going through the applications for new team members, and I'm feeling a bit overwhelmed. The business side of things is growing, but I don't want to lose the heart of what we've built. I want to make sure that whoever we bring on board shares our passion for the mission." Emily nodded. "I think that's a good point. It's easy to get caught up in growth, but the culture of the team is what makes this project special. We need to make sure that our new hires understand that." Noah spoke up next. "Maybe we can include some interview questions that focus specifically on values. It's not just about skills, it's about the right mindset. We should ask them how they would contribute to the guide's mission and how they align with what we're trying to do here." Jack thought about it for a moment. "That's a great idea. It's not just about technical expertise or qualifications. We need people who are excited about the vision and want to contribute to something meaningful." Sarah added, "We could also bring in some trial projects or tasks for candidates to work on. That way, we can get a better sense of their working style and see if they truly understand the project." Jack smiled, feeling more confident with each idea that was suggested. "I like that. Let's make sure we're taking the time to get to know these candidates beyond their resumes. It's not just about what they can do, it's about who they are." Over the next few weeks, the team went through a rigorous hiring process. They worked together to design interviews that tested not only skills but also cultural fit. They asked questions about the candidates' personal values, their passion for health and wellness, and their ability to work in a collaborative environment. It wasn't easy, but Jack was determined to make sure they brought in people who would help elevate the project without compromising its integrity. When they finally made their selections, Jack felt a sense of relief. He had found a group of people who not only had the right skills but also shared the same vision and values that had driven him to start the guide in the first place. With the new team members on board, Jack knew the next challenge was going to be managing the growing team effectively. He didn't want to lose the close connection he had with everyone, but he also knew that as the project expanded, he couldn't continue to be involved in every little detail. It was time for him to step back in some areas and empower his team to take on more responsibility. One of the first things Jack did was schedule a team meeting to discuss the transition. As everyone gathered in the conference room, Jack addressed the group. "I'm excited to have you all here," he began. "This is a big step for us, and I want to make sure we continue to work together as a cohesive unit. The guide has always been about helping people, and that's something we all believe in. As we grow, I want to make sure we stay focused on the mission and maintain the culture we've built." He paused for a moment, looking around the room at the new faces. "I know this might feel like a big change, but I'm confident that each of you has something special to contribute. I trust all of you, and I want you to take ownership of your roles. If you ever feel like something is off or that we're losing sight of what's important, speak up. We're in this together." The team nodded, and Jack felt a sense of pride and optimism. It was a new chapter for the project, but it was one that was built on the foundation of trust and shared values. Over the next few months, Jack worked closely with the new hires, making sure they felt supported and integrated into the team. As the team grew, Jack also made a conscious effort to maintain regular communication with everyone, ensuring that the values of transparency, collaboration, and personal growth remained at the core of everything they did. One evening, as Jack walked out of the office and into the warm evening air, he took a deep breath. The guide was continuing to grow, and so was he. He had learned the importance of trust, delegation, and maintaining a strong sense of purpose. With the right team in place, Jack felt confident that the project was ready for whatever came next. He looked up at the stars, thinking about the journey ahead. The road wouldn't always be smooth, but Jack was no longer worried. He had built something meaningful, and as long as he stayed true to the mission, he knew that the guide would continue to make a difference in people's lives. Jack had always prided himself on staying ahead of the curve. He was never satisfied with just meeting expectations, he wanted to exceed them. But with the guide's recent success, the pressure to innovate had become overwhelming. The world of health and wellness was crowded, and there were other companies out there trying to create similar tools. Jack couldn't help but feel the weight of the competition, knowing that if they didn't stay relevant, their work could easily be overshadowed by someone else's. Late one evening, Jack sat at his desk, staring at a proposal for a new feature. It was bold, sleek, and promised to set the guide apart in the marketplace. But there was a part of him that hesitated. The idea was big, it could catapult the guide to new heights. But it also felt like a departure from what had made the project successful in the first place. As he scrolled through the proposal, Jack felt the familiar tension rising in his chest. It was a race against time to stay ahead of the competition, but was this new feature really aligned with the values of the guide? Or was it just another flashy gimmick to attract more users? His phone buzzed, and it was a text from Noah. "Hey Jack, I've been thinking a lot about the new feature you're working on. I know you want to stay competitive, but don't lose sight of why you started this. Does this new feature really serve the people who use the guide? Or are we just chasing after something that looks good on paper?" Jack stared at the message for a moment. Noah had a way of cutting straight to the heart of things. His words echoed the doubts Jack had been quietly carrying, and they reminded him of the core question: what was the guide really about? Was it about creating the flashiest, most advanced product? Or was it about creating something that truly helped people, no matter how simple it seemed? Jack took a deep breath and picked up his phone to call Noah. When Noah answered, Jack didn't waste any time. "I'm torn, Noah. I've been working on this new feature, and it's big. It's the kind of thing that could get a lot of attention, but I'm starting to wonder if it's really in line with the mission. I've been feeling the pressure to stay ahead of the competition, but now I'm not sure if that's the right move." Noah listened for a moment, then responded, "It's easy to get caught up in the race, especially when you're doing well. Everyone wants to be on top. But remember why people trust the guide in the first place: it's because it feels personal, real, and human. If you start adding features just to compete, you risk losing that authenticity." Jack sat back in his chair, processing Noah's words. It was true. The guide had resonated with people not because of its complexity, but because of its simplicity and effectiveness. It gave users exactly what they needed in a way that felt customized, not corporate. The last thing Jack wanted was to turn it into something that felt like a product designed for profit rather than a tool built to improve lives. "Yeah, I know you're right," Jack said quietly. "I think I've been so focused on keeping up with everyone else that I've lost sight of what matters. We didn't build this to be the biggest, we built it to be the best at helping people. I need to get back to that." Noah chuckled. "Exactly. And honestly, if you stay true to what made the guide great, you'll stand out more than if you just try to follow trends. People want something real, not just another tech trend." Jack smiled. "Thanks, Noah. You always know how to put things in perspective." After hanging up, Jack felt a renewed sense of clarity. He had been so caught up in the pressure to innovate that he had almost forgotten the reason he started the guide in the first place: to make a genuine difference in people's lives. He didn't need to chase after the latest tech trend or build features that were flashy but unnecessary. He needed to focus on what worked and make it even better. The next day, Jack called a meeting with the team. As they gathered around the conference table, Jack shared his thoughts on the direction they were going. "I've been thinking a lot about the future of the guide, and I've come to realize something important," Jack began. "We've built something special, something that people trust because it's real, authentic, and it works. I don't want to lose that by chasing the next big trend." He paused, looking around at the team. "We don't need to add flashy features just to compete. We need to stay true to what we're doing, and we need to make sure everything we add is meaningful. We're not here to be the biggest or the most high-tech. We're here to make a difference in people's lives. Emily spoke up. I agree. We've gotten so much feedback from users about how helpful and simple the guide is. Let's stick with that. If we add anything, let's make sure it aligns with our core message, helping people improve their lives without overwhelming them. Jack nodded. Exactly. Let's focus on quality, not quantity. Let's refine what we've built and make sure it keeps serving our users in the best way possible. The team was on board. They decided to scrap the flashy new feature and focus instead on refining the existing ones. They would improve the user experience, streamline the interface, and make the guide even more intuitive. It wasn't about adding complexity, it was about making sure that every feature served a real purpose. In the coming months, Jack worked closely with the team to implement these changes. They continued to listen to user feedback, making small but impactful improvements that enhanced the guide's effectiveness. And, most importantly, they stayed true to the mission. They didn't try to chase after the latest trends, they focused on what mattered most, helping people live healthier, happier lives. One evening, as Jack sat at his desk reviewing the latest feedback, he couldn't help but smile. The guide had grown, but it had grown in the right way. They had avoided the temptation to chase after every new trend and had instead stayed focused on their mission. Jack realized that the true power of the guide wasn't in its technology, it was in the people it helped. The pressure to innovate would always be there, but Jack had learned that true success wasn't measured by how fast they could move or how many features they could add. It was measured by the impact they made on people's lives. And as long as they kept that in mind, the guide would continue to thrive. The calm that Jack had grown used to in the past few months was suddenly shattered. One morning, as Jack sipped his coffee and reviewed his emails, a notification popped up that made his heart sink. It was an alert from the system, a bug that was affecting thousands of users. A major update had gone wrong, and the guide's main features were no longer functioning properly. The app was down. Jack's stomach twisted as he read through the messages flooding in from frustrated users. Why is the guide not working? I rely on this every day, one message read. Another complained, this is the second time in a week. What's going on? He quickly picked up the phone and dialed Emily's number. Emily, what's happening? Jack asked, his voice tight. We're seeing a major system outage, Emily replied. The latest update has caused a bug, and it's affecting all users. We're working on fixing it now, but it's going to take time to identify the root cause. Jack's mind raced. The guide had always been reliable, and now, just as they were gaining momentum, everything was falling apart. He knew this was the kind of setback that could break a company, especially one that had built its reputation on trust and reliability. We need to get this fixed, and fast. Do whatever it takes, Jack said, trying to keep his cool. I'm on it, Emily responded. As Jack sat back in his chair, the weight of the situation settled in. For the first time in months, he felt powerless. The project he had poured so much time and effort into was now on the brink of failure. He couldn't help but wonder if they had moved too quickly, pushing out an update without thoroughly testing it. It felt like a rookie mistake, and Jack was the one who had signed off on it. As the hours ticked by, Jack stayed in constant contact with Emily and the tech team, monitoring the situation closely. The bug was complex, and they couldn't seem to isolate the problem. The team was working tirelessly, but it was clear that the issue wasn't going to be resolved quickly. Meanwhile, the flood of complaints continued to grow. It wasn't just the system issues that weighed on Jack's mind, it was the potential damage to the guide's reputation. If users lost confidence in the guide now, it could be impossible to regain it. Jack had worked so hard to build trust with his audience, and now, everything felt like it was unraveling. Later that afternoon, Jack called Sarah. She had always been the calm in the storm, and he needed her perspective. Sarah, I don't know what to do. We've got a major issue with the guide, and I'm worried it might be too much for us to recover from. I thought we were past the growing pains, but now this happens. What if people stop trusting us? Sarah's voice was steady. Jack, I know this feels like a disaster right now, but setbacks happen to every company. What matters now is how we respond. The guide was built on helping people, right? So this is just another opportunity to show them how much we care about fixing things. I know, Jack replied, running a hand through his hair. But how do we fix it when we're in the middle of it? You fix it by being transparent, Sarah said. Don't hide from it. Be honest with your users. Let them know what's happening, what you're doing to fix it, and how long it might take. People respect honesty, and if you show them that you're working hard to resolve it, they'll stick with you. Jack paused, letting her words sink in. She was right. The guide's success hadn't been built on perfection, it had been built on trust and a commitment to improvement. If he wanted to maintain that trust, he needed to be upfront about the situation and show that the team was working tirelessly to resolve the issue. After their conversation, Jack drafted an open letter to all users. In it, he explained the situation, apologized for the inconvenience, and reassured them that the team was doing everything possible to fix the issue. He also promised regular updates on the progress. It was a difficult letter to write, but Jack knew it was the right thing to do. He posted the letter on the website and sent it out to all users. Then, he made sure to personally respond to as many user messages as he could. Jack didn't want anyone to feel ignored or neglected. If they were frustrated, he would listen, and he would work to make things right. The next few days were a blur. The tech team worked around the clock, and by the end of the week, they had identified the root cause of the bug. It turned out that the issue had been caused by an incompatible code integration during the update. It wasn't an easy fix, but they managed to implement a patch that restored the guide to full functionality. As the system came back online, Jack watched the flood of positive messages pour in. Users thanked the team for their transparency and their hard work. Some even expressed appreciation for the personal responses they had received from Jack himself. It was clear that while the outage had been frustrating, the honesty and effort shown by the team had earned back the users' trust. In the days that followed, Jack reflected on what he had learned from the crisis. At first, it had felt like the end of everything. The pressure had been immense, and he had questioned whether they could ever recover. But now, looking back, he saw that the crisis had been a turning point. It wasn't just about fixing the bug, it was about how the team responded to it. Their resilience, their transparency, and their commitment to improvement had not only saved the guide but had strengthened the relationship with their users. It was a humbling experience, and one that reminded Jack of an important lesson: no matter how much success a company has, it will always face challenges. What mattered was how they dealt with those challenges, how they responded to their users, and how they used adversity as an opportunity to grow stronger. Jack felt a renewed sense of purpose. The guide wasn't just about providing a service, it was about building a community. A community that could weather storms together. And with that, Jack knew that the guide would continue to thrive, not because it was flawless, but because it was built on trust, resilience, and a shared commitment to helping others. The weeks following the crisis had been a whirlwind. The guide was back online, stronger than before, and user trust had been restored. But with that restoration came a new challenge. The demand for the guide had skyrocketed, and Jack found himself faced with an entirely new set of questions. The team had been working tirelessly to keep up with the increased demand, but it was becoming clear that they couldn't continue at this pace forever. The guide's infrastructure had been built for a much smaller user base, and it was beginning to show signs of strain. There were frequent updates to handle, an influx of support requests, and a growing need for new features. One afternoon, Jack sat at his desk, staring at a new proposal from the business development team. It outlined the possibility of expanding the team, adding more servers, and investing in a larger marketing push to bring in even more users. The proposal was tempting, it promised exponential growth, the kind that could turn the guide into a household name. But there was a part of Jack that hesitated. He loved the community they had built. The personal connections, the messages from users who had found real value in the guide, it was everything he had hoped for when he started. But now, the idea of scaling seemed to come with a risk of losing that intimate, personal touch that had set the guide apart. Jack picked up his phone and called Sarah. He needed to talk this through with someone who understood what the guide was all about. "Hey, Sarah. I've been looking over the proposal for scaling, and I'm torn. It's everything we've worked for, more users, more exposure, more opportunities. But I'm worried about losing what makes the guide special. We've always prided ourselves on being real, human, and personal. If we scale too quickly, we might lose that." Sarah's voice was calm and steady. "I understand where you're coming from. Scaling means change, and change can be scary, especially when you've built something that feels so personal. But you don't have to lose that. Scaling doesn't mean abandoning your values, it just means finding new ways to serve more people while staying true to who you are." Jack leaned back in his chair, processing her words. "But can we keep that personal touch if we expand? If we add more team members, more users, more everything? How do we make sure the guide stays true to its roots?" "By being intentional about how you scale," Sarah said. "You don't have to go all in on expansion overnight. You can take it step by step. Focus on the quality of the experience, not just the quantity. Hire people who share your vision, who understand why the guide matters to people. And keep communication open, both with your team and your users. Don't let the growth change who you are." Jack exhaled, feeling a little lighter. Sarah always had a way of framing things that made the path forward feel clearer. "You're right," Jack said. "It's about finding balance. We can't grow at the cost of what makes the guide great. But we also can't stand still. If we want to help more people, we need to grow. I just need to make sure we do it in a way that keeps our values intact." Sarah laughed softly. "Exactly. And remember, growth doesn't always have to be about getting bigger. Sometimes it's about getting better. If you focus on improving what you already have, the users will follow. Trust in the guide, and the rest will follow." Jack hung up the phone feeling more confident in his decision. Scaling was necessary, but it needed to be done thoughtfully. They couldn't compromise the integrity of the guide, but with the right strategy and team, they could expand in a way that still felt personal and meaningful. The next day, Jack gathered the team for an all-hands meeting. The room was filled with anticipation. Everyone knew the company was at a crossroads, and Jack was ready to share his thoughts. "I've been thinking a lot about the future," Jack began, "and we're at a point where we need to make some decisions about how we move forward. The demand for the guide has never been higher, and we're being presented with an opportunity to scale. More users, more features, more exposure. The question is, how do we do this without losing what makes the guide special?" He paused, looking around at the team. "I've realized that growth doesn't have to mean sacrificing the core values that have made this work. We can scale thoughtfully. We can hire the right people, invest in the right systems, and still maintain the personal touch that our users love. It's going to take some time, but I believe we can do it." Emily, who had been quiet until now, spoke up. "That's the key, intentional growth. We don't need to rush. We need to focus on the user experience and make sure that no matter how much we grow, we're still providing the same value to every person who uses the guide." Jack nodded. "Exactly. And it starts with us. We're the ones who set the tone. We need to hire people who are passionate about what we do and who can help us scale without losing sight of the mission. It won't be easy, but if we're intentional about it, we can grow without compromising what makes us unique." The team agreed. They all shared a sense of excitement about the future, but also a determination to maintain the integrity of the guide. The meeting ended on a hopeful note, with everyone committed to ensuring that growth was a process, not a rush to hit numbers. Jack's mind was buzzing with ideas as he left the meeting. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but for the first time in a long while, he felt a sense of clarity. Scaling didn't have to mean losing the guide's heart, it just meant finding a way to expand without compromising the mission. Jack had always believed in the guide's potential to help people, and now, he was more determined than ever to ensure that it reached even more people in a way that felt genuine and true to its roots. It was past midnight, and Jack was still at the office. The blue light of his laptop reflected off his tired eyes as he scrolled through a new round of user feedback, feature requests, and investor inquiries. His coffee had gone cold hours ago. The room was silent, save for the low hum of the building's HVAC and the occasional creak of the floor above. He rubbed his temples and sighed. The growth was real. The guide had tripled its user base in the past quarter, partnerships were forming, and the team had expanded. On the surface, everything looked like success. But inside, Jack felt like he was cracking. His days had become a blur, back-to-back meetings, emails that never stopped, decisions that piled on one another, each more urgent than the last. He hadn't seen Sarah in over a week, hadn't called his mom back, hadn't taken a real breath in what felt like months. The guide, his passion project, was consuming him. A sharp pain pulsed in his neck, and he leaned back in his chair. For the first time in a long time, he asked himself, what if I'm not okay? He looked around the room, the whiteboard filled with notes and targets, the sticky notes scattered on the wall, the half-finished sketches of new designs. It all looked like progress. But it also looked like obsession. His phone buzzed. It was a text from Sarah. Hey, I know you're buried. Just checking in. Haven't seen you in a while. Miss you. Let's talk soon. Jack stared at the message for a long time. That night, he walked out of the office. He didn't reply to emails. He didn't open another Google document. He just walked. The streets were quiet. Spring was trying to push winter out of the city, and the air had that strange, hopeful scent of fresh beginnings. As Jack walked, he thought about how far he'd come, from a guide desperate to solve his own pain, to building a guide that helped tens of thousands of people. But now, he was teetering on the edge of becoming the very thing he once ran from, disconnected, exhausted, and numb. He found himself at a small neighborhood park. It was empty except for a couple of benches and a dimly lit swing set. He sat down and took out his phone, not to check emails, but to call Sarah. She answered on the second ring. Jack. I'm sorry, he said, the words coming faster than he expected. I've been in overdrive. I didn't mean to shut you out. I lost track of myself. There was a moment of silence on the other end. Then she said softly, I've been worried about you. I know. I've been worried about me too. You've built something incredible, Sarah said. But you can't give everything to it. If you burn out, the guide burns with you. You need to start taking care of yourself again. Jack nodded, even though she couldn't see him. You're right. I thought I could just push through. I thought that's what it meant to be a leader, to carry everything. But I've hit a wall. You don't have to carry it alone. They talked for another hour, about the guide, about the early days, about the quiet joy of doing less but feeling more. When Jack finally hung up, he felt something loosen in his chest. He wasn't okay yet, but he wasn't alone either. The next morning, Jack did something that stunned the entire team, he took a full day off. No emails. No Slack. No brainstorming. He went hiking alone in the nearby hills, just him and his thoughts and the wind. He let himself feel the exhaustion, the pride, the fear, the hope. And then, when he returned, he did the second boldest thing, he called an all-hands meeting to talk not about growth, but about balance. Look, he told the team, I haven't been practicing what we preach. We talk about wellness, about longevity, about healing, but I haven't been living it. And if I'm not okay, how can I expect you all to be okay? How can we expect our users to feel cared for by something that's built on burnout? The room was silent. So here's what's going to change. We're not just going to talk about balance, we're going to live it. That means smarter hours. That means prioritizing mental health. That means building a culture that allows us to sustain this long term. We're not sprinting anymore. We're building something that lasts. There were a few nods. Then applause. Emily stood and said, honestly, thank you. We needed to hear that. We've all been pushing hard, and I think we forgot that taking a breath isn't weakness. It's wisdom. From that day forward, things didn't get easier, but they got better. The team found a rhythm. The office introduced wellness mornings every Friday, where no meetings were allowed and people could take walks, rest, or focus quietly. Jack started therapy, something he'd always put off. He spent more time with Sarah, with his friends, with himself. The guide evolved, too. They added new sections, not just for leg cramps or nutrition, but for burnout, for mindfulness, for managing stress in high-achieving lives. Users responded overwhelmingly. It turned out they needed that just as much. Jack had learned that healing wasn't just a product. It was a process. And leadership didn't mean sacrificing yourself. It meant being strong enough to admit when you weren't. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough?